It's that time again when I put down my manga volumes, turn off the anime, and instead I grab my popcorn bucket and talk about one of the Bleach movies. In this case, the third one, Fade to Black. I recently got around to watching it after seeing on my almighty master list that I am now able to without risking any spoilers. Just a reminder, I've talked about the first two Bleach films already. Feel free to watch their respective videos, but in a nutshell, I was really moved by Memories of Nobody and thought it was fantastic. While Diamond Dust Rebellion kind of left something to be desired for me, it was okay, but I didn't think it reached the same level as its predecessor. So how does this third film fare when so many third movies in a series are disappointing? Thankfully, there's a whole lot of great third films too, so let's get into it and find out which side this lands on. Initially, I was just intrigued by the movie's poster. Whereas the first two films have these posters showing the cast of characters, both new and old, Fade to Black's poster is much more minimalistic, but in some ways perfectly set up the atmosphere of this movie. Ichigo surrounded by the familiar Zanpakuto of his fellow Soul Reaper. It's a striking image, to say the least, and immediately had me intrigued. Why are all their swords everywhere? Are they all beaten? Is he the only one left? Are they all fighting him? Is he the one causing them to drop their swords? There's a lot of questions in this image, and yeah, it got me really excited to watch the movie and figure out what was actually going on. So on to the actual plot itself. The concept of the movie centers around an attack on Soul Society that makes everyone forget about Rukia ever existing, which by extension makes everyone forget about Ichigo too. Everyone except my boy Kon. I'm gonna say it right off the bat. I loved how much Kon was in this movie, and wasn't just along for the ride, but actually played a crucial role too. Where I'm at in the manga right now, Kon hasn't been around, so it was really good to see him again. He brings just the right levity sometimes when needed, and more importantly, because Kon is a mod soul who remembered Rukia when not even Ichigo did, he sets off the chain of events that help us win in the end. So Kon is the real hero of this movie, and I love that for him. Anyway, once Ichigo remembers Rukia, he goes to investigate what happened and why his memory got erased, and when he goes to Soul Society, he's treated like an intruder and a stranger by the other Soul Reapers, and has to get to Rukia before the people responsible cause irreparable damage to Soul Society. The concept for the movie was intriguing right off the bat. Like, sure, amnesia and memory loss stories can be very overdone in like every show that's ever been made. But I thought this one used those kinds of tropes pretty effectively because it was such a broadly felt mass amnesia. It gave us an opportunity to kind of reset some of these characters in a way and highlight just how important both Rukia and Ichigo have been to the world around them throughout the whole series. For instance, I loved that Renji would have never learned Bankai, and Byakuya would still be the same old deadly stickler to the rules that he used to be if they never knew Rukia, if they were never inspired by her, if they were never inspired by Ichigo. Without their memories of Rukia or Ichigo, all of Soul Society is compromised. It was just cool seeing characters like Ichigo and Renji clash again, getting a glimpse of that old rivalry, and even seeing Ichigo face off with other Soul Reapers in general was kind of a fun gimmick for a few minutes. Like, he's fought some of them before, whether it's the Soul Society arc or there was a part of Memories of Nobody where the Soul Reapers were kind of against Ichigo, but this felt, I don't know, I think there was another factor with how they didn't know him after everything they've been through and everything he's done for them. It just added an extra element to it all. And this is the second Bleach movie to deal with memories after the first film, but in a pretty different, kind of more direct way, but nothing in this movie concerning memories and losing them. Unfortunately, it never reaches the heights of Senna's struggles and tragic ending in that film, but I still loved how some of these emotional remembrance moments were handled. I especially liked the notion that memories go beyond the brain. The soul recognizes recognizes and carries the memories too. So even though their minds are being tampered with, a part of them still remembers anyway. The plot, despite wiping her mind for most of the movie, is very Rukia-centric. It unfortunately kind of turns into another instance of saving her, but I actually really liked that it highlighted how so many characters felt about her and the impact she had on them, whether it was Ichigo, Renji, or Byakuya, or the villains. She really is kind of the heart and soul of the series sometimes, and the whole movie really happens because of a couple people that she impacted in such a big way. Although I do think there was an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into all of this, and they didn't really take advantage of it. Renji has known Rukia since they were kids, and Byakuya obviously has a complex history with her, and while both of those relationships were touched upon here, which was great, you could have really found something powerful in one of those places, I think. Most of the emotional weight was carried by Ichigo's relationship with her, which is absolutely fair enough, but I can't help but wish that the others had something similar, because it feels kind of weird how quickly Ichigo completely remembers her when someone like Renji or Byakuya, especially Renji, I mean, he's known her forever, and he only had a vague recollection of her, and even that took some time, whereas Ichigo remembered her pretty quickly. I don't know, it was just something I was thinking about during it. I do wish they incorporated Renji's history with her a little bit more directly, especially with how she connects with the antagonist. Like, I was kind of surprised Renji wasn't at all shown or referred to in the flashbacks we see in this movie pertaining to the enemies, because wouldn't Renji have been around, or at least I would imagine still would have been a big part of Rukia's life at this point? I don't know. So now would be a good time to talk about the antagonists of Fade to Black. They are a pair of siblings that were close with Rukia a century ago in the Rukon district. They were like these orphans who are mysteriously now running around with a weird scythe, taking Soul Reaper's memories and having a personal grudge against the Soul Society in general. I wouldn't say that they're spectacular antagonists by any means, but they're solid for this film's story. They're definitely more interesting than the bad guy of Memories of Nobody, and similar in some ways to the bad guy from the second film, because like him, they are coming from an unknown part of a known character's past. But this to me works much better than Diamond Dust Rebellion did, mainly because that villain's origin was kind of wrapped around the whole twin Zanpakuto idea, which I didn't really jive with, and that frankly felt weird in the established universe, whereas the origin of these antagonists, while it's also kind of messy and feels a little like an afterthought, overall it was more interesting and wasn't twisting and bending the lore in weird ways like the second movie did. Like, these villains are kind of tragic in their own way, and they're really just trying to learn their names, which they don't until up toward the end of this movie when Rukia finally remembers what she named them back when she knew them on the streets just before they die. Like, it's a sad story, but I feel like it was kind of undercooked a little bit. Like, it really wasn't explained to us in a meaningful way until like way late in the movie. I don't know, I feel like that could have been executed a little bit better, but essentially these siblings are victims. The parasitic hollow of it all that's actually responsible is kind of poorly explained, but I liked the idea of that hollow, and you know how much I love hollows, and I love this one's weird worm design with the scythe for a tail. Like, that was a little creepy. But the whole, like, taking control of the kids as they died so that they were sent to Waco Mundo for 100 years, but then they woke up and overpowered the hollow inside of them so that they were in control of his memory erasing powers. I don't know, but it worked well enough for the movie. It was a little vague and a little poorly explained, but I thought it still was just enough to like make it apparent what was going on. It just could have really hit harder emotionally if they didn't save that backstory to like the last 7 minutes of the movie. We finally kind of learn what happened to these people. I really did appreciate that it was a very different kind of threat than Bleach usually tackles, but one that seemed justifiably big in scale. These movies seem to try to really make everything massive by the climax so that they can make sure all of these characters get little moments of action. Like all the captains, some of the lieutenants, like they're always trying really hard to include the periphery characters, which, some of these are fan favorites, like my favorite characters, so I appreciate it, but they always seem to go out of their way to make sure these stories warrant having all these characters by the end. There's no small scale story in these movies so far. And I think that's where the first movie succeeded, where maybe the second and third lacked a little bit, was it did have that massive scale by the third act, but it still had a very strong personal core at the center, which this movie did, but not quite as emotional as it could have been. I did really love when the siblings somehow merged with Rukia and became this badass version of Rukia with a scythe. I don't know how that happened, but it didn't really matter. It was just a sweet design, and I liked the clash between her and Ichigo as he's desperately trying to get through to her. It was very classic, Dark Phoenix kind of thing, where you're fighting someone you care about and they're not themselves and you're trying to reach them. Classic stuff. I liked that a lot. Outside of that, I was very surprised by Urahara's return to the Soul Society in this movie, including straight up just putting on his old captain uniform. I don't know why he did that, but it was cool to see. This just feels like this huge thing to happen in a side movie. And from what I know, this movie is outside of the bounds of canon, but as cool as this was to see Urahara come back and stand alongside his old friends again, I don't know if this will take away from something similar ever happening in the manga, I don't know, it was an undeniably cool moment, but it felt like such a big moment for this character, especially after I just recently read Turn Back the Pendulum, so it's weird to just throw it into a movie when him being exiled and away from his old colleagues is the crux of his character in the current story. I just don't know why it was here when that moment could still potentially come in the real main story. Maybe this takes away some of that oomph of seeing him with them again, but it was still fun to see him interact with the Soul Society directly like that. I really liked him yet again, visiting Mayuri behind bars. That just seems to be Urahara's preferred way of speaking with my psychotic boy. And thematically, Urahara's return could kind of work with this film because so much of this movie is about absence and forgotten friends and how individuals shape lives and one's memories, which could be applied to him and the hole he left in some of these characters' lives from the Soul Society, but that angle wasn't really played up much. It wasn't really delved into. It seemed like, it'd be cool if Urahara fights alongside the Soul Society dressed up as a captain again, and that's what they did. And yes, it was cool. But I don't know if this was the right place for it. I don't know. We'll see. Other highlights of this movie for me would include Byakuya's role in the movie. While he's kind of reverted to his old self with his memories of Rukia gone, it was nice to see him get featured more in a movie and to see what the absence of Rukia would mean to his perception, considering his relation to Rukia's sister. I also liked Mayuri having literal backup copies of his own brain, because of course he would. And I loved Kenpachi being freed after being sidelined the whole movie, so he can go fight a giant monster, laughing the whole time. These movies always go out of their way to at least give Kenny a moment in the final act, and I can never get enough of it. Amazing. And one of my favorite things about this movie was the utilization of past moments in the series, especially when a movement now would echo something in the past, like with Renji versus Ichigo. That was great stuff. The movie was so good at visualizing deja vu for the characters and the viewers. But yeah, my biggest hang-up with the movie is probably just that it didn't quite hit the emotional beats I think it had the potential to. I think the story was set up in a way where it could have really had a lot of power, but the execution, mainly with the villains and their whole backstory, didn't lend itself to having the impact that it could have. It was good, but it could have been amazing, I think. I enjoyed the movie, don't get me wrong, and I had a good time watching it, but I do think it never fully wrapped itself around my heart like the first film did, but that movie set a really high bar for the following films. I was just hoping with the subject matter of forgetting important people in your life that this would hit a little bit harder than it did. It almost got there for me, but it didn't quite wow me in the end. Enjoyable, not amazing, but I definitely liked it better than Diamond Dust Rebellion. Sorry, Captain Hitsugaya. In the end, I'm glad I checked out Fade to Black, and while it isn't my favorite Bleach movie so far, I think there's a lot of great stuff in it, and I think it's definitely a movie that is worth remembering. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Really enjoyed talking about this movie, and I'm looking forward to getting back into the manga with you. Unfortunately, I'm at such a massive part of the story, and I've got so much to say, so it's going to take a little bit for that video, but hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Fade to Black. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.